Sometimes the really big stories, the powerful truths, they aren't just in the grand pronouncements. They're hidden in the details, almost like finding a meticulously drawn map, piece by tiny piece.
Absolutely. It's often the careful attention to the small things that gives the big picture its real weight, its credibility.
And that's exactly where we're going today. We're diving deep into one particular chapter, Joshua chapter 21, which lays out a really crucial, very detailed aspect of how a nation settled this land.
Right. This chapter is less about, the drama of conquest and more about the careful administration afterwards. It's about fulfilling instructions given much earlier.
Yeah, our goal here is to really unpack how a specific divine command about allocating land was carried out with, well, surprising precision, and what that precision tells us about promises being kept fully.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. We have the Levites. Now remember, they were the tribe set apart for religious duties.
Right. Unlike the other Israelite tribes, they didn't get one big chunk of territory as their inheritance.
Exactly. Their inheritance was more spiritual, tied to their service to God. But I mean, they still needed places to live,
Of
obviously.
course, homes, communities.
And this wasn't just forgotten and then suddenly remembered. There was a plan. Way back, the Lord had commanded through Moses how this should work.
Which leads us right into the beginning of Joshua 21.
Mhm.
The heads of the Levite families, they go to the leaders. That's Eleazar the priest, Joshua himself, and the heads of all the other tribes.
And they meet at Shiloh, which was a really important center in Canaan then, kind of the main gathering place, especially for religious matters.
Okay.
And their request isn't like, hey, can you help us out? It's very direct. They say something like, the Lord commanded through Moses that you give us towns to live in and pasture lands for our livestock.
So they're basically calling in a divine IOU, something already established. It's about implementation time.
Precisely. It's the fulfillment stage. And the response from the other Israelites?
What do they say?
Well, the text says they acted immediately, just as commanded. So, as the Lord had commanded, the Israelites gave the Levites the following towns and pasture lands out of their own inheritance.
Out of their own inheritance. That's a key detail, isn't it? They had to carve out these places from the land they had just received.
It really shows how seriously they took that command. It wasn't just an afterthought.
Okay, so they agreed to do it. But how did they decide which specific towns? 48 towns are eventually listed. That's a lot to distribute fairly.
Right, and this is where that precision comes in. The method used was casting lots.
Casting lots. Now, for us today, that sounds like chance, like rolling dice.
Uh-huh. But in that context, it was understood differently. It wasn't just random chance. It was seen as a way of discerning God's will, letting divine guidance determine the outcome, especially in distributing something as important as land.
So it's tied into their understanding of divine direction. Interesting. And the towns weren't all given to the Levites as one big block, were they?
No, not at all. That's another critical part of the plan. The allocations were made clan by clan. The Levites had three main family branches descended from Levi: Kohath, Gershon, and Merari.
Ah, so the distribution followed their own internal family structure?
Yes. And this naturally led to them being scattered throughout the territories of the other tribes.
Which makes sense for their function.
Right.
Being the priests and teachers, they needed to be among the people.
Exactly. It embedded them throughout the whole nation. They could teach the law, offer guidance, and perform their duties effectively because they were accessible everywhere, not just isolated in one corner of the land.
Okay, so let's maybe walk through the allocation without necessarily reading every single town name, because that could get a bit dry for everyone listening. But the overall pattern is fascinating.
Agreed. Let's look at the sweep. First up were the Kohathites. This group was significant because it included Aaron's descendants, who were the priests.
The priests.
Oh.
And they received their portion first by lot. How many towns did they get?
They were allotted 13 towns. And significantly, these came from the tribes of Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin.
Okay, Judah, Simeon, Benjamin. That's the southern part of Canaan, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Near where Jerusalem would eventually be so important.
That placement does seem strategic, doesn't it? The text lists specific examples like Hebron, a major city, which we'll come back to, and others like Libnah, Jatir, Beth Shemesh. From Benjamin, places like Gibeon and Anathoth. So 13 towns total for the priests.
Got it. 13 for the priests in the south. What about the other Kohathites, the ones who weren't priests?
Right, the rest of the Kohathite clans, they received 10 towns.
10. and from different tribes.
Yes, their allocation came from Ephraim, Dan, and the half-tribe of Manasseh that settled west of the Jordan River.
So moving more into the central and sort of northwestern part of the land.
Exactly. Still part of that pattern of distribution. We see examples like Shechem in Ephraim, another significant name, plus Gezer, Aijalon, Tanakh, 10 towns drawn from those central and western tribal areas.
Okay, so that covers the Kohathites, priests in the south, others more central west. Who was next?
Next were the Gershonites. They also received 13 towns.
13, same as the priests, but from different tribes again, I assume.
Yes, completely different set. Their towns came from Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, those are northern tribes, and the half-tribe of Manasseh located east of the Jordan in the area called Bashan.
Ah, so the Gershonites are placed more in the north and also across the Jordan to the east. We see names like Golan and Bashan and Kadesh in Galilee.
Right, both very notable places, again, distributed widely across those northern and northeastern territories. 13 towns for the Gershonites.
Okay, Kohathites done, Gershonites done. That leaves the third main branch.
The Merarites. They received 12 towns, slightly fewer, but still a significant number.
12. And where were their towns located?
Theirs came from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun.
Okay, Reuben and Gad are east of the Jordan, in the south and central part of that region. And Zebulun is up north, but west of the Jordan. So the Merarites are also spread out, with a strong presence east of the river too.
That's right. You get examples like Bezer from Reuben, Ramoth and Gilead from Gad, both east of Jordan, and Jokneam from Zebulun up north. 12 towns to complete the allocation for the Merarites.
Wow. Okay, let's tally that up. 13 for the priests, 10 for the other Kohathites, 13 for the Gershonites, and 12 for the Merarites.
Add them together, and the text gives the explicit total. The towns of the Levites in the territory held by the Israelites were 48 in all.
48 towns, taken from the lands of nearly all the other tribes, distributed by lot according to clan, scattered across the entire nation.
Yeah.
That's remarkably specific.
It is. And don't forget that detail the text repeats. Each town came with its pasture lands.
Right. Each of these towns had pasture lands surrounding it. This was true for all these towns. It wasn't just a house plot. It was land for their livestock, for their support.
Just as the original command through Moses specified, it underlines the completeness of the provision. They received what they needed to live and function.
Now, as we were going through some of those example towns, a phrase kept popping up for a few of them. A city of refuge.
Yes, that's a really important overlay on this allocation. 6 of these 48 Levite towns were designated as cities of refuge for one accused of murder.
Okay, what did that mean practically?
These were special sanctuaries. If someone killed another person unintentionally, accidentally, they could flee to one of these 6 cities.
Why?
To escape immediate vengeance from the avenger of blood, usually a relative of the deceased, until their case could be properly heard by the community. It was a crucial part of their justice system, providing safety before a trial.
And the text names them specifically within this chapter.
It does. Hebron in the south, Shechem in the center, Kadesh in Galilee up north, and then east of the Jordan, Bezer, Ramoth in Gilead, and Golan in Bashan.
Notice how they're spread out geographically too. East and west of the Jordan, north, south, central. Accessible.
Exactly. That was intentional, so someone fleeing wouldn't have too far to run. And it's significant. These were Levite towns.
Why?
Well, the Levites were the custodians and interpreters of the law. It makes sense they would administer these places of legal refuge and oversee the process, ensuring fairness according to the law.
Okay, so we've seen the command, the request, the intricate process by lot, by clan, and the detailed result. 48 towns with pasture lands strategically placed, including these 6 special cities of refuge. It's incredibly detailed.
It really is. But then, right at the end of the chapter, the focus pulls way back. It shifts from all these specifics to a sweeping conclusion about this whole period.
Right. The text makes some huge statements.
Right.
First, so the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their forefathers, and they took possession of it and settled there. That's a massive claim, all the land.
And it continues. The Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their forefathers. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord handed all their enemies over to them. It paints a picture of total victory and secure peace.
A time of fulfillment. But then comes the clincher, the verse that really connects all the preceding detail, like the Levite counts, to the ultimate point.
Yes, it declares, not one of all the Lord's good promises to the house of Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled.
Every. Single one.
That's the assertion. And the implication is that the meticulous, almost painstaking detail we just went through, allocating precisely 48 towns with pasture lands to the correct clans in specific locations, serves as concrete proof of this claim.
It's like the author is saying, you see how carefully even this complicated arrangement for the Levites was carried out, exactly as commanded. That's how thoroughly God kept all his promises of the land and rest. The detail isn't just administrative trivia, it's evidence of faithfulness.
Exactly. It suggests that divine promises aren't vague hopes, but specific commitments that are fulfilled in tangible, verifiable ways, right down to the last detail. The precision matters because it demonstrates the totality of the fulfillment.
So, as you listen to all this detail about ancient land grants and city lists, you might be thinking, okay, interesting history, but what's the takeaway for me?
Well, I think it's fundamentally a story about faithfulness. Consider the sheer complexity. A promise made generations earlier involving 13 groups, the 12 tribes, plus the Levites needing land conquered, divided, and then specific portions redistributed across the whole territory according to intricate rules.
And this chapter presents that incredibly complex operation as completed. Done. Down to every last town and its pasture land. It's a really striking picture of commitment, of seeing a complex promise through with absolute precision.
So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. When you think about big promises, complex plans, or even just the idea of faithfulness itself, whether it's human commitments or divine ones, what does this chapter, with its marriage of tiny specific details and a grand declaration of total fulfillment, make you ponder about what it truly means for a promise to be kept, fully kept?
Something to think about. That concludes our deep dive into Joshua chapter 21.